3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. In this podcast, we're charting the journey of Calix and how its groundbreaking technology has come to be used in many industries across the globe, cement, lime, wastewater, etc., to allow those industries to operate in a more sustainable way and with a smaller environmental footprint. Up until now, we've been telling this story from Calix's point of view, talking to a range of people who work for Calix about what they've done and what the company and the technology has done, but no company operates alone. And in this episode, we're going to examine the collaboration between Calix and a Swedish renewable technology company called SaltX Technology. Now, SaltX Technology has themselves developed new technology that can help solve some of the problems associated with the storage and supply of renewable energy and meeting peak demand and timing issues. And we'll find more about that as we go through. So, how and why did Calix and SaltX decide to work together? What have they been working on, and what have been some of the challenges and rewards of this collaboration? For the first time on Innovating for the Earth, I'm joined by two guests. From Calix is Andrew Okely, Calix's General Manager of Sustainable Processing and Commercial. G'day, Andrew. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, James, and nice to hear you again.
Andrew is in Sydney. He's been with Calix since 2012 and was previously Calix's General Manager of Strategy and Commercial. And joining us from SaltX Technology in Sweden, Corey Blackman, their Head of Technology. Corey has worked for SaltX since 2011. He's worked all over the world in the sustainable energy sector for 15 years, and he's got a PhD in energy and environmental engineering. G'day, Corey.
Hi there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. So let's begin. Corey, tell us, in language that everyone will understand, what does SaltX do?
Okay, so SaltX, we focus on large-scale energy storage systems. So it's based on a lime-based technology, and we've developed a very special system for ensuring that we can provide high-temperature heat to industrial processes, or even to provide to run a steam turbine and provide electricity.
And how's SaltX trying to help industries transform to using more clean energy?
So we know that we're in front of let's say a transition or a revolution of the energy system. There's a lot of work with electrification and also of using waste heat streams or waste energy streams, I should say. So at SaltX, we work with being able to store the energy when it's in surplus and then provide it when it is needed. So, and this happens a lot when it comes to intermittent or variable renewable energy sources that need to be stored when we have an abundance, and then we would dispatch it or deliver it when it's needed for different applications.
And of course, that's been one of the main obstacles, hasn't it, to using more renewable energy more quickly, that people say, well, it's great when the sun's out, but what about when it's raining?
Exactly. So that's a major challenge, the variability and the intermittency, when you know that in several industrial processes, you want to run them all the time, or you want heat when when it's cold out, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Andrew, already I see some similarities between what SaltX is doing and what Calix are doing, trying to work at helping industries operate in a more sustainable way. Prior to your collaboration, what challenges were Calix going through, and why did you start thinking about working with SaltX?
Yeah, well, it was... really came about, James, because we started to really think about electrifying our technology and using renewable energy. And of course, as you just mentioned, that the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day and the wind doesn't blow all the time, but we'd like to run 24 hours a day like most industrial processes, or our clients would. So yeah, we were thinking about how to tackle that challenge. I think at about the same time that SaltX, let's say, discovered Calix and our technology, and they were thinking about how to get the energy into their proprietary salt.
So when was that?
When was that? That's I think that's nearly 2 years ago now. There's some people. One who's been on this show, Dr. Mark Skeets, met a similar character, I would say, in the SaltX world, and they got chatting over a conference coffee. Could have been a beer, you'd never know. Things started to happen from there. And
it seems, before we get into specifics of how your collaboration might work, but we've done an episode of this podcast about, I guess, the Calix mission statement, that it's not just about making money, it's about doing something that's going to be useful for the world. So already there seems like a synergy in terms of those things. Would you agree with that, Corey?
Yes, definitely. So this is something that we've been looking at a lot. There's quite a bit of discussion about, let's say, sustainability and having a sustainability ethos, etc., and even circular economy. So we see that that's quite important, especially for the partners that we've been working with.
So, Andrew, there's a big difference, isn't there, between saying, hey, you're trying to do something that's good for the environment and helping companies operate more sustainably, and so are we, good on us. Getting from there to actually working together, how did that journey occur?
Yeah, like everything, I think it started off with small steps and working to understand what SaltX were trying to do, and then seeing how Calix may fit into that particular approach. And then we, as we often do, we said, well, let's have a look at some material and see. We went to the whole testing phase. That's what we typically do to see if there's something there to really start to develop. And from there.
And so, what was the project you were doing some testing on?
So we took the proprietary salt material that is used to store the energy by SaltX, and we looked to convert that from the calcium hydroxide into the calcium oxide. In the calcium oxide state, it has stored energy. Corey has more expertise on that than me, of course, but it's a thermochemical storage of energy. So we put the energy into the salt, and therefore it's sitting there stored. And of course, SaltX have the other side of the equation, as well as the salt, to recover that energy, which Corey was mentioned earlier, and I'm sure can tell us more about.
Yeah, tell us more about it, Corey, bearing in mind I studied law at university, not science, or engineering.
Yeah. So the salt that we have, the proprietary salt technology that we have, is based on lime, and the reaction of lime and water is a quite very energetic reaction, and so it becomes quite high in temperature, and we can recover this temperature in the form of steam. And so we need to be able to put this energy into the material, so the calcium hydroxide that we start out with, in order to split it into calcium oxide and water, and where the calcium oxide stores this energy chemically. And so this is where the Calix system comes in. We worked to understand how that would look, what kind of performance we would get, cost variables, etc. And these were very important factors for us. What we do at SaltX is that we try to look for commercially available equipment that we can use in order to do this process. And this is where it came in with the Calix technology.
And Andrew, you're looking at this as an energy source to power your calciner?
Well, I think that's what first attracted us. So the stored energy that Corey is talking about could be fed back in to feed a calciner or any other industrial process that's trying to run on electricity. More generally, of course, now working together as an opportunity for Calix to participate more broadly in this energy storage space with SaltX. So I think it's probably become bigger than just, can we look at this technology as a way to support a fully renewable Calix calciner to wow, there's some big needs and gaps in the market. That the type of energy storage that the SaltX system can do is different to, say, a battery. And again, I'd much more prefer to hand over to Corey to explain that difference.
Well, we will in a moment. Corey, it's great to come up with an energy source that solves some of the problems of renewable energy. But of course, I suppose when when your market is big industries, you've also got to ensure that it's an economic solution. Was that a challenge for SaltX, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so I would say what's interesting, especially when it comes to commercially available equipment and industrial equipment, it's usually designed or developed to operate all the time. So basically 8,000 hours per year, more or less, with some time for maintenance, etc. With our system, we would want it to charge as necessary and discharge as necessary. And so this means that you will have a slightly different economic equation where you would be running the system for shorter periods of time. So this is something that needs to be considered, especially when we, how would I put it? When we work with industrial processes that will need energy all the time, but we need to provide energy at the specific time, especially when demand is quite high, and then our system would basically be dormant for a period of time. And whenever the system is dormant, it's basically not making any money. And so this is why the economic equation is quite important for us.
Yeah, well, for everyone. And we'll talk, Andrew, you mentioned the potential the collaboration might have in the future, and we'll talk about that. But I want to go back to when you started collaborating a couple of years ago. I mean, you've explained how the technology fits together and how each of you complements what the other is doing. That makes sense. But when you actually started putting things together and working together, were there cultural problems? Were there management issues? Did you have to work through things? We like to do it this way. Oh, no, we like to do it that way. Andrew?
I think, James, very, very few.
Wow.
At one level. At another level, maybe that's because almost all of this period we've been in the world of COVID, and the usual, these Aussies mostly, not exclusively, but these Aussies probably going over to Stockholm and sitting in the room with Corey and his team, and would that have made us work even better together or less well? Well, we'll never know, because I think now we've progressed a long way with understanding how each other works.
I think what you're suggesting is that it's harder to have a fight over Zoom than it is. Be interesting. I'm sure before long, someone will get a grant to study that, the amount of heated disagreements in Zoom versus live meetings.
Yeah. I think you've got to know people well already to have a serious disagreement over Zoom.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a bit more formal way of doing business than face-to-face meetings and things. So yeah, I guess there's a study there for sure for somebody.
Corey, what would be your perspective on that? How you handle different ways of doing things and challenges that arose in the early days of the collaboration?
Yeah, I would say that it's very similar. It's the fact that before, let's say, pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, you could basically you'd have a few chats online, and then you can go over and have a 2-day workshop and hash out all the different challenges and potentials of the technology and problems and that type of stuff, and you can really build a kind of relationship. But it's actually quite hard to do that on Zoom or Teams, where you're basically sitting for relatively short periods of time as well. I mean, it's very, very hard to get anybody to do a full day workshop or a 2-day workshop on Teams or Zoom. So it takes a substantially longer period of time in order to really get that understanding and to ensure that we understand each other on different levels of what the technology can do, or even culturally. And I can say that also the time difference is also something that kind
Yes.
of limits as well the amount. There's basically a reasonable 2-hour window where we don't have to push or work days too early or too late, and so to fit all meetings, etc., and discussions within this 2-hour window was not necessarily so simple. So this is something that took some time to overcome.
So, given what you've said about the limitations that Zoom and COVID have imposed upon us, you're both companies that are bringing new innovative technology and processes into established industries to help them, to help those industries operate better and more sustainably. Are there? But your technologies are very different. Are there things that you've learnt from each other? From the collaboration, Andrew, and thought, we could do a bit more of that in our company?
I think the short answer is you definitely. And in fact, part of the technology suite that SaltX have, we're working with them, if you like. I know we're working with them anyway, but on a different aspect of that in other parts of our business. And yeah, so they're sort of doing some modelling and design work on the unit, or the point of discharge is the way SaltX describe it, where they recover the energy, and we're really interested in applying that to some of our other, particularly our lime business in that. So and then I think, not necessarily me personally, but I know our engineering team have really appreciated the systems and the way that Corey's engineering and project team have worked in when the teams have been and continue to work together to build the pilot plant in Stockholm that is at least the core part of what we're doing together. But as I say, we're already finding other things we can look at together that are interesting.
And Corey, what did SaltX learn from Calix? And be as specific as possible. Because it's easy to say, yes, we learned a lot from them, let's move on. But tell us something specific.
That's a tough question. Very specifically, I would say that we learned a lot about the driving factors in different markets, and we've also been working a lot with different application areas. So that is something that's to understand, let's say, using of different types of energy sources, not only electricity, but also, for instance, gases, etc., how we can recover energy from that. So we've discussed that quite a bit, and we've been looking at, let's say, for instance, system modeling on that area and utilizing the point of charge, as we call it, or how we get the energy into our material, working on different possibilities together with Calix.
Did either of you learn anything from the other about? We've talked in another episode about Calix's culture and how they see sustainability and innovation as, they're trying to make it not just pretty words and a mission statement, but bake it into everything they do. I'm just wondering if you learnt anything from each other, from each other's culture, alternatively, how you react under pressure with deadlines and whatever. Andrew?
Yeah, that's a difficult one in a sense, James, because I feel like, and again, I've never been face-to-face with anyone at SaltX, but I feel like our cultures are very similar and aligned, and we work very openly. We talk about what we want to achieve, which really always comes back to where can we apply our collective technologies to make improvements, and of course that means the economics have to stack up, because otherwise no one's going to do it. So it's very pragmatic, but it's also very very focused on how we make the can work together to help make these transitions especially for heavy industry, as we would describe it.
And look, I guess if you're trying to work for another company, with another company that had very different views about those things, you probably wouldn't work with them for long. It just wouldn't work. What about you, Corey?
Yeah, I have to agree with Andrew, and I would say with Andrew and his team, we've been working very much around the clock. There's been a lot of, let's say, quick things and quick decisions that need to be done. And so this is also quite good that we're both quite nimble companies that can really make decisions relatively quickly. And that's what's needed, especially in this innovation arena. So I think we've worked quite well together in that area.
Everyone in Australia says agile. I think nimble is a better word. I like it. I'm going to try and get agile phased out. It's been one of those words like pivot has just been done to death. We need a better one. And I think nimble is it. So again, just going back to this first collaboration, what were the results? Were they good? Were they what you hoped? Andrew?
Well, I think at a high level, so far it's been really good because, as I say, we first thought about SaltX in one context, and now we're seeing many more opportunities to work together in terms of let's say, the most advanced project, which is the pilot plant in Stockholm. I guess so far so good, but we haven't actually run it yet, to my knowledge, Corey. It's still sort of in the final phases of construction, so time will tell. But I think the teams have worked together really well in difficult circumstances to get things built for that plant and made available. Fingers crossed again. We're disappointed that, it's at this point difficult for anyone from Calix to be there to really offer that hands-on support. But, Corey's team will work around that and Zoom will play its role.
And, next year, things will be different, won't they? I said that last year, but
one would hope.
I'm hoping this year I'm right. So obviously the partnership was fruitful enough for you guys to have lots of discussions about what else you can do. So tell us about, Corey, some of the potential other projects you've been exploring between SaltX and Calix and where they might lead.
Yeah. So we have several potentials. So at SaltX, we've of course been looking at different applications of oil energy storage systems, but we've also identified several other areas that unfortunately I can't disclose at this point in time because they're still under development. But I can say that we've discussed and established probably 3 other areas where we can definitely collaborate very closely.
And without pushing you to reveal anything you're not allowed to reveal, would it be fair to say that they are all about helping industries move to operating in a cleaner energy, more sustainable way?
Exactly. So it's all about decarbonising industry, but even looking at decarbonisation of district energy grids and that type of stuff.
Andrew, anything you can say without, getting sued by someone?
No, well, James, I think along the same lines is, I think it's okay, hopefully, Corey, to say that we're now having a regular separate discussion amongst some members of both companies that are actually talking about other projects, the next possible projects. So, there's one team really focused on delivering the pilot plant and doing that work. And then there's a group of others who are thinking, gee, what else can we do here? And we both have this mission to decarbonise, industry and play our role, which will be small on a world scale, I suspect, because it's such a massive task.
Yeah. Well, that didn't sound too controversial to me. I don't think you've breached any. I can't imagine you've breached any confidentiality agreements there. But I mean, it is a massive task. But on the other hand, making some difference to it, and also getting your 2 companies together to think about how together you might be able to make, a difference that neither of you alone had imagined. That must be very exciting, Corey.
Oh yes, definitely. The interesting thing about this area is that there's a lot of work to be done. Everybody knows that. There are lots of possibilities, but it's kind of up in the air, and it's up to the innovative companies to really move quickly and to take advantage of the possibilities that are there. And we see that both SaltX and Calix are well positioned in order to do that. It's just to really understand where the market is going. Unfortunately, it's moving relatively quickly in some areas, and then in other areas it's basically lagging behind in terms of, let's say, the political will, or even when it comes to establishing good business models, and also basically leaving behind legacy equipment and moving to newer and more sustainable forms of operating, producing materials and storing energy and delivering energy, etc.
When you mentioned, Corey, political will, people have different views on this. Some people think, a progressive government's been replaced by a conservative government. There goes the cause of renewable energy. We're going to be set back 10 years. Other people say, well, look, governments have some power, but it's often overestimated, and this change is happening anyway. Governments can nudge it forward or they can hold it back a little bit, but they're not as influential as many think. Your view?
Yeah, so my view here is that influence, but at the end of the day, regulation is quite important, and this is why we don't dump refuse all over the place and etc. And we've been basically using our atmosphere or air as a dump of refuse for carbon emissions, and so this is why regulation will come into play, where we make causing environmental damage difficult or painful for companies. And that's where political will is going to come in. I'm not saying that governments need to come in and say, oh, you must do this or you must do that, or this is the way that you need to do it. That's not the job of government, and that's not really the job of politicians. The job is more or less say that we need to stop polluting, and we need to find ways of doing that. So right now, given the fact that that's not the case, we have a challenge where to pollute or to produce emissions is not painful or costly enough. So you won't get that transition other than from goodwill. And so, of course, there's certain companies and certain people with that mindset and ethos that are pushing in that direction. But then the vast majority are really like kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen.
Yeah, your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's much the same. I think that it's the position of governments is becoming a bit less critical, because the position of society is really starting to firm up, and any major industry has that social contract available. So yeah, I agree with Corey though that the trick is to identify those that see that and see that they should be embracing the change. And those that simply have that deeper, true desire to be leaders in that space, as organisations, and it's not a criticism. So some companies are just more able, for whatever reason, to pursue those objectives and be those early movers than others, and some countries have obviously applied more social pressure through their governments to make to set up structures and an environment that supports those early movers. But I think Corey's certainly onto something, that there's a lot of companies who want to be first at going second.
That's a great way of putting it. So as we near the end, what challenges and opportunities do both your companies now face? What are the predominant ones you face at the moment, Corey?
The challenges market, I would say the the predominant challenge for us is market uncertainty. So who's going to do what and when should it be done? The need for energy storage is quite clear. Everybody knows, okay, well, the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time. We need to store these sources of energy and be able to dispatch them when necessary. That's the good thing about fossil fuels at the end of the day. It's energy that's been stored for many millions of years, and that we basically can basically burn or push out whenever we need to. And so this is the need for energy storage is quite important. And we also know that the scope and the scale of energy storage is also a huge thing. I can quote a few, let's say, scientific articles which say that we need to basically store about 10 to 20% of the energy that we produce from renewables. So if we look at like by 2040, we are going to need to basically deploy about 1.5 gigawatts hours of energy every day until 2040 in order to meet our global demands for electricity only. And this is not including that heating demands and all the other demands that we're going to have over the years. So the scale of the problem is massive. However, the push or the move towards this or to tackle this challenge has not been there so far. For some countries, as Andrew said, have put in the framework in order to do that, and some companies have also put in the frameworks in order to do that. But in general, it's a bit slow, and this is a challenge to understand. Okay, when the ramp up happens, we need to be very ready for it.
Yep. Andrew, challenges and opportunities facing you and Calix.
Yeah, I think they're similar in that it's at that point in the process, not just with the areas we're looking at with SaltX, but generally for Calix, where we've got a certain amount of resources, and we need to be careful how we choose projects. They take a while to go from first discussions to an implemented project, several years. And if you wind up on the wrong path, you might have a very good project, but maybe that industry that's behind that project changes their tack, because everything is pretty fluid in this space. And a new way they decide to try a different way to decarbonise. So, and the last thing we want is sort of, projects that may prove to be very technically successful, but then don't get rolled out across an industry. So, yeah, we just have to keep examining the landscape, the legislative rules that change very quickly in different areas, and then where a lot of companies are really now digging deep into what is their 2040, 2050 strategy. Not just what are their targets, but actually they can see 2050, and many of the people making decisions in those companies can even foresee still being, alive. Whereas the year 2000, the same people running those companies, it's pretty hard to pitch at 2050. So it's close enough now that simply saying I want to be net zero is not enough for them. Now it's like, well, yeah, but you should have a plan, because we plan for 20 years, we plan for 30 years in major businesses like these, heavy industry. So what's our plan? And so that's really where I think a lot of these processes are. And as they commit to a plan, well, we want to be ready then to be a part of that, where that's appropriate. But there's no shortage of opportunities and ideas. It's being on the right ones, with the right partners.
Yeah. Oh, look, thank you very much for that.
I can add there that I can concur that there's been a lot of discussions about goals in the last 5 years or so, but now we are actually seeing plans starting to be hashed out. So I think that's a very positive thing for the future, that there's actually work on strategy and what do we need to do, and actually putting numbers down to things, and this will give a much better picture of what needs to be done and how it should be done.
Yeah, look, it's easy to state goals, isn't it? Net zero by 2050. I want to get fit, whether they're big goals or little goals. It all comes down to the plan. You know, I said I wanted to get fit a month ago and nothing's happened. Well, that's because you haven't had a plan, probably. Look, thank you both for joining us, and in the very respectful and friendly way you addressed each other. It was clear why this has been such a harmonious collaboration between SaltX and Calix. Lovely to talk to you both. Thank you for listening to this episode of Innovating for the Earth. There are many more.